The next show on this list is Kid Notorious back in 2003, a show about a suave James Bond as protagonist based on a real person. That person is Robert Evans.
Who the fuck is Robert Evans?
Oh, that Robert Evans.
I still don't know who that is.
Robert Evans used to be the head of production of Paramount back in the 70s, and being well known as a successful producer within the Hollywood scene. I mean, when you produce movies like Chinatown and both Godfather movies, which Evans brags about this fact repeatedly throughout his life, and this show,
this is Robert Evans. He produced The Godfather 1 and 2. Oh, yo, you better not have produced 3.
3? I'd never get within a mile of that piece of shit.
You're gonna be a big deal. I mean, back then those movies were very profitable, and now we see those movies as filmmaking legends. My personal favorite movie he's ever been a part of producing was the 1980s Popeye, with Robin Williams doing a pretty decent impression of Popeye, but also looking completely disgusting with his giant anchor arms. I personally think it's the body hair on Robin's forearms that makes him look really disgusting, but hey, at least the sets look nice and Shelley Duvall looks the part and gave a great performance. So Evans at this point in time when he got this show was kinda at the end of his career in terms of the entertainment industry. Discarding anyone's feelings on the movies themselves, his run in the 80s and 90s don't really compare to what he was able to achieve in the 1970s. With him coming into trouble with some weird run-in with the law, allegedly with him distributing cocaine back in the 80s. I mean, I guess it is so weird. Almost everyone that was somewhat of a big shot was on blow or tried it at some point during the 80s. Movie stars, musicians, hell, even one of the most iconic for the worst reasons draft pick in the NBA died of an overdose after being drafted number 2. So cocaine was a really bad drug that was going around back in the 80s for popular icons. And also, a good bag of movies he's produced were pretty shitty, even he would admit that, and flopping like the sequel to Chinatown. You had Jack Nicholson in this and you could barely scratch $10 million. That's not good at all. Evans' last real hurrah, I guess, was with this Matthew McConaughey movie called How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Critics were pretty on the movie and it didn't flop. But I guess you can say Kid Notorious is also a good last hurrah for him as well. Basically, Kid Notorious is a fictionalized show about Evans being a big producer again and going on wacky adventures with his team of servants. Tolly May, a big black maid Evans hired, which her main thing is she's fat and she's black and kind of obnoxious. She's just not a fun character really. Her only real redeeming quality to me is that she's voiced by Niecy Nash, who I really liked in another Comedy Central show, Reno 911. In that weird show, she would clean people's shitty houses. Alan English, Robert Evans' actual real-life butler, came and voiced his character along with Evans himself, which is actually pretty cool. I guess who else can replicate Evans' butler better than Evans' real butler? And Puss Puss.
Oh, the indignity.
Pretty epic. And weirdly enough, Slash from the band Guns N' Roses is an actual recurring character within this show and is even Evans' next door neighbor.
What in the hell are you doing, Fuzzy?
I'm making soup.
Oh no, not in my potato peeling pot you ain't.
That is so not cool.
This show was a surprise to me, because it has all the signs of, hey, this looks like utter garbage. What were those signs to me exactly? 1. Very little or barely any remembrance of the show. Not everything that's not remembered means that the work itself is terrible. There's been a lot of underappreciated things that are pretty excellent, especially within animation, that no one talks about. But that kind of thinking can also work in reverse, as in it was so shit or mediocre in the eyes of some people that maybe it just didn't warrant being remembered. And 2, let's be real, the style of the show on first glance doesn't give the audience any hope that it'll be good. A poor style or poor animation does not equate to being bad, but it certainly doesn't help in trying to make someone's first impression. But I found this to be a fairly entertaining show, and the reason I find it so fun is just Robert Evans himself. His actual delivery and charm is kind of infectious, a recurring thing that many of the people who have worked with him has said about him personally. He's a very interesting person to follow and to learn about in my opinion. And some jokes are actually really funny, like how the show will poke fun or acknowledge certain things Evans has been a part of or just Hollywood in general. Like they'll acknowledge things that has bombed in Evans' face, and the show doesn't really shy away from going in on him. And jokes about the filmmaking industry itself. This is probably not for everyone, but I think this is one of the enjoyable sleepers I was looking for in this marathon. Talking about and watching the good shows of the network is fine, but finding the ones you had little to no hype for and finding it to be actually pretty good is oddly more satisfying to me. It's a real shame there isn't like a DVD or a platform to buy this on. There is one, but I don't know, those sites would sell your credit card information, so you know where to go for this one.
He's the guy who slams the door shut on Sharon Stone's vagina. That's the dumbest line I've ever heard in my life. Who wrote this crap?
You did, Bob.
I wrote it? Well, that is fantastic. Let's take it from the top.
Next we have Shorties Watching Shorties. Well, I guess I'm gonna make this a little bit quick because the show is very simple. Shorties Watching Shorties is about two babies, a baby Patrice O'Neal, rest in peace, and a baby Nick Diapollo, I don't know what the fuck this guy is, watching TV and watching cartoons. Basically the entirety of the show is audio taken from stand-up comedians, and they would turn that audio into a cartoon. As is said many times, comedy is subjective, and with many comedians that this show features, there's gonna be ones featured that honestly fucking suck, and some that are actually pretty entertaining. I don't, and a lot of people don't really care for Dane Cook's material, so when his shorts come up, you know I'm gonna hit that fucking fast forward button, but when Patton Oswalt or someone I actually like comes in, it's time to stop. The humor is a mixed bag, but for the most part the show has an assortment of comedians I like and has some good bits, so I was actually pretty entertained for a chunk of it. The visuals of the show are actually pretty decent. It's actually quite good. I mean, I think the two babies that we're supposed to follow look pretty ugly in terms of their design, but the actual show that they watch on the TV is actually quite nice. The show is very reflective of its time it was made in, where cartoons and characters were undertaking these weird and interesting geometric designs. They're like all over the place. It's not a bad style and it has some pretty decent animation. Though if I'm being honest, I kind of wish that they did what the MTV show Greatest Party Story Ever did, where they would change up the style of animation entirely from time to time. I feel like that would make the show to me stand out a lot more and be more memorable and work a little bit better. Because the tonality and style of these comedians vary, and I feel if the change were to happen, it would make the show a little bit more enjoyable. But the style of animation the show already has is pretty good, so it could be way worse. Shorties Watching Shorties lasted for one season and was never renewed. Reasons aren't really clear on why that happened, but low ratings were most likely the culprit like many other shows. Next we move to Drawn Together, one of Comedy Central's other big hitters in terms of their animation department. Drawn Together was made for Comedy Central back in 2004 by Dave Jesser and Matt Silverstein. Not really the most well-known writers. They've had some writing stints with some other cartoons like Family Guy and later on The Cleveland Show, ooh boy. The only other thing they've done as of note recently was the development of Golan the Insatiable. Basically, Drawn Together is a reality show like The Real World, but instead of young adult losers just doing some mundane or boring young adult activities, you get parodies of characters from different cartoons and video games and put them inside a house together. I like the premise of the show, but it's kind of not really utilized that well and is honestly a bit unnecessary in the long run. The show basically later on just straight up abandons its concept altogether in the later seasons. The only thing that they really keep is like the character interviews or character diaries, I don't know what the fuck you call them. Looking back, the whole reality show aspect of the show is just kind of an excuse as to get the characters to have a pseudo reason to live within the same proximity of each other. I guess making storylines that are heavily parodying or kind of akin to these shitty reality shows are kind of getting pretty old, but it's kind of weird seeing a show try to reinvent itself like that so quickly in its run. But who are these characters and how are they? Our first character is Captain Hero, an obvious parody of Superman, and his whole thing is he's Superman but is kind of a sex-driven idiot. Basically a regular teenager but given the power to crush the Empire State Building. Spanky Ham, a crudely animated Flash cartoon on the internet, probably Newgrounds, but his whole thing is that he's kind of a crude asshole like everyone's on Newgrounds. Toot, basically Betty Boop but instead fat and ugly and voiced by Tara Strong. Foxy Love, that black chick from Josie and the Pussycats mixed with Scooby-Doo. Woodor Sockbat, a parody of SpongeBob who manages to be even more gullible than SpongeBob. I don't know what the fuck he is exactly. I don't think anyone does. Xander, Link from Legend of Zelda, but he's gay. Ling Ling, a literal Pokemon. And Princess Clara, the parody of the typical Disney princess, but is infused with every racist ideal known to man. Honestly, all these characters are kind of terrible. Like, all of them are just kind of unlikable assholes. Except for maybe Woldor. You don't always gotta like a character to have them be considered a good character, but if you're gonna have these as your mains, you should at least have something to like about them. I mean, if you want an example, Bojack and Sterling Archer are both dickheads, but their stupidity and attitude is infectious enough to make us want to follow them. But usually when a show has this kind of problem, it would spell disaster, but for some reason, Drawn Together is a weird anomaly. I honestly don't give a shit what happens to the characters. Like with all these adult shows where shock humor is apparent, I feel like they bitch out midway through with some lame moral reason to tie it up and give the show some sort of heart to it. In some cases it works pretty well, and others is not so much. Or these shows are drawn in this super unappealing style to where it doesn't give the show any actual bite when something seriously disturbing or edgy happens. Drawn Together doesn't give two fucks about moral compasses or trying to have good intentions. Its sheer existence is just to be fucked. Some of the shock humor in the show is actually pretty funny, but I'd be lying if there isn't a lot of jokes in this that miss the mark and aren't really executed that well. And sometimes you can see when the writers just try so hard, and it's hilarious when they fucking do this too, because they miss by like a mile. One example, watch episode 1 of Drawn Together. Easily one of the worst episodes in the series. Sure, you can throw the argument, well, it's the first episode, maybe it's even the pilot of the series, and they haven't gotten into this made up groove yet. I can get early episode blues happen, but this I can't really give a pass. The first episode just moves way too freaking fast, like it's paced terribly, like it moves at breakneck speed, it feels like I'm watching it in fast forward. And you can get a feeling when you're watching this particular episode that the writers are just trying to find that offensive hook to sink in. It's fucking awful. It's an awful first impression. With looking at the early reviews, they also feel that way. I mean, it had like 2 jokes I find moderately funny in this episode, but for the most part, it's one of the worst first impressions I've seen in a cartoon. I mean, the only good thing about it other than those 2 jokes is that it sets the precedent to all the stupid shit that'll come later in this series. That's really it. Luckily, after season 1, in my opinion, the show improved and really came to its own going further. By that, I mean it stopped giving even more of a shit when it already didn't give one. Also, another thing why I think Drawn Together is a little bit more tolerable to me than most shitty, edgy adult cartoons is that even if I hated the show and found the crude humor to be disgusting or unfunny, I can't really say that I feel like it was badly produced. The actual style of animation looks quite nice, actually. Every character looks almost like how the universe they are parodying and have really cool characteristics. Like Captain Hero being a parody of Bruce Timm's style and Clara looking like a Disney character. And Toot being a good knockoff of beloved cartoon icon Betty Boop.
Let's take a look at the past season and pay our respects to all the Korean children who died drawing this insipid cartoon.
Drawn Together is not for everyone. There's most definitely going to be a debate about this show's actual quality and how shock humor isn't a good form of comedy or something below. But I think it was pretty entertaining in the window of time I saw it in. 6th grade and in middle school, and when every episode was free on the Comedy Central website, was a great and fun time to be alive. I said this before, but shitty racism, violence, and absurd bullshit is a great time when you're like 13 and you think, dude, Happy Tree Friends is so freaking epic. To me now, it still has some charm to it, but I'm definitely not as into it as my middle school counterpart. But it's alright, especially compared to shows later down this list. Sometimes Drawn Together can look like a godsend when compared to those. The movie, however, is kind of a waste of time and is filled with even shittier jokes and cheaply put together animation. It's not really worth your time and I wouldn't even bother. Next show we move on to is one I know a lot of you fucks don't remember, because I don't even remember it. Freak Show. Freak Show was a Comedy Central show created by, actually, H. John Benjamin and David Cross back in 2006. The show is about a group of superheroes, not the actual cool guys who fight monsters or solve big crimes and gets the girl. I mean, some of those types of things do occur in the show's universe, but we're not following the cool guys. No, we're following these deformed freaks who get stuck with these shitty jobs no one wants to do. Like, go get the president some weird nuts from this remote island no one fucking knows about, or find the president's cat. These poor deformed humans are being demeaned even by the president. It's pretty rough. The show follows these freak shows and follows many freaks of many kinds. Benny and Tuck, a pair of conjoined twins who can separate but choose not to. The Bearded Clam, a morbidly obese woman fused with a giant clam who is also an anarchist who was raised by eco-terrorists. Not many powers, but the show says that she has blinding bitch juice. The world's tallest Nebraskan, a Nebraskan man whose powers is he can shrink 6 inches. Preemie the premature baby can vomit. And probably the biggest freak in this show is the Log Cabin Republican, who has the powers to turn into a burly gay man. This show is also another diamond in the rough for me. While obviously it does look really cheap and disgusting, it survives with good dialogue, interaction, and certain absurdities and good voice acting from David Cross and H. John Benjamin, who both of them basically carry the show. The show obviously doesn't look too good visually, but for what it is, it's acceptable, and I find it very fitting. If it was well animated, I think it would be even more disgusting with these character designs. Fun fact, the studio that animated this has done many other shows or worked on many of these shows that are more dialogue based and more stagnant. Radical Axis Studios, the same one responsible for a lot of these cheaper Adult Swim shows like C-Lab, Aqua Teen, and even a bit of Archer. If I were to point out an episode to start with, the first one isn't a bad choice, but if you really need a good tester, check out the 4th episode. I found that one to be the funniest. Freak Show did not last for very long. It lasted for one season and was eventually canned. Sad, but at least I have the DVD. And I even have the comic book that is barely even a comic book. It's more of like a pamphlet. But hey, it was pretty good. It was a solid 7 out of 10.
You're a writer, you're a comedian, you're a voice actor. What do you see yourself first and foremost?
A Jew.
Next, we finally move on to Little Bush, the most baffling show I think Comedy Central has made. Little Bush was a show created in 2007. Wait, that's gotta be a typo. Nope, it's 2007. A 2007 show about the presidency of George Bush by a guy that worked on The Simpsons? I hope to God they did that lame, shitty promotional shit where they market the show by putting, "From the writer of The Simpsons, present Little Bush" on the front of the DVDs. That would be truly epic. Not even gonna bullshit this one, Little Bush is just straight up awful. One, the jokes are just terrible. Like, there's no subtlety to any of the jokes at all, and probably the worst thing about the show is that they're satirizing things that have the right to be satirized, but are so fucking old and dated that it just feels weird watching this. Especially now. I mean, yeah, that's obviously going to be the case now. It's 2018, but this came out in 2007. George Bush's presidency was on the way out then, and fucking Yes We Can Obama was on his way in. So why was this made in 2007, and why is there a sequel that came out in 2008? There's not a real whole lot of clarity on that, actually. So time to play my favorite game on this channel, Armchair Producer, where MarsReviews tries to explain the production he's never been a part of and has no business experience at all and try to make sense of it. These are all just theories, people. Do not take this as like gospel. So Little Bush was on this platform on mobile phones called Amp Mobile. Amp Mobile being this defunct phone service company that would be giving things like ringtones, games, and even watch some video content and shows on your shitty 2000 phone.
You're not gonna believe this. I'm watching Amp Mobile live right now. Guess what they're doing? They're jiggling. You like that, don't you? See? You had this phone. You could see some jiggling right now. You want to see it? You gotta pay me. Bro?
So Little Bush got his start there, and honestly, because the phone industry was kind of changing, and also we never hear from them in the modern day, Amp Mobile fucking died in 2007. And due to this, and holy crap, this is just sad, 80,000 of the 175,000 subscribers to Amp Mobile were non-paying users. If we do the math, that's 45%. Almost half of them were non-paying. That is fucking sad. Amp Mobile started in 2005 and died in 2007. So basically what I'm assuming is they died, and Comedy Central, which is owned by Viacom, and Viacom also being the owner of MTV, that's an important detail because MTV was a big investor within the Amp Mobile company, along with AT&T, but whatever. That should have spelled bad news from the beginning, like MTV's your biggest investor? Oh, you were just destined to die. So here's my assumption. Like a man cleaning out his garage and just picking out and remembering, oh yeah, I bought this. Viacom looked at this series and went, this is somewhat topical, even though it really isn't. And we kind of invested in this family company, and we could probably get some brief news coverage, which is really fucking funny that they actually did. Like, this was like on Fox News, and it's just like really interesting seeing Fox News, or like somewhat of a big news corporation, just talking about fucking Little Bush.
Controversial, it is also somewhat revolutionary. It's the first show to start as a cell phone series, then move on to YouTube, and then get picked up by a cable TV network.
It's called Little Bush. It's the animation that pokes fun of President Bush and his cabinet.
The first that's ever been able to make that jump from mobile shorts to television.
Great. The idea is obviously super clever.
I love it. And you know, I think Little Bush is one of the most genius cartoon adventures I've ever seen in my life.
Little Bush. That's funny.
And also, this show looks pretty inexpensive, so I'm assuming Viacom just went like, here son, air this. And that's how I interpret Little Bush getting put on. I don't know what the actual thought process was when they decided to air this, or whether or not why the Simpsons guy wanted to create the show at all. I think he just was kind of mad at George Bush, but I don't think I'm too far off. But at least one great thing came out of Little Bush: the stupid and awful musical numbers that are in all the episodes. Move over, Phineas and Ferb, you freaking hacks. Little Bush did it first and Little Bush did it better.
Well, I'm f***ing McCain, 'cause I wanna have his black baby.
And that sweet, sweet animation that exists in this show, really pushing the boundaries in the animation industry. And to think such quality could have such humble beginnings as being on a cell phone of all things. Why don't we look at Little Bush as being an inspiration? They're a more inspirational story than like fucking Adventure Time going to Nickelodeon being a pilot. Little Bush was a pilot on a phone. Fuck Adventure Time. Little Bush is probably the worst thing to come out of the Bush administration, and that's including the Iraq War. I wouldn't be so hard on this show if, again, it wasn't so dated. At least with some other shows like Our Cartoon President, as dense as I think some of the heads of that show like Stephen Colbert are now, where I just think they're really unfunny. At least they were smart enough to get their yucks in while the iron is hot. Little Bush is terrible. What a shocker. At least it has something historical about its existence, so I guess it serves somewhat of a purpose, other than potentially entertain, because it really didn't. But we did get this really good music video out of it.
My little bush, my little bush, my little bush.
So thank you for watching, thank you Little Bush, and most of all, thank you George Bush for your 8 years of being president. Without you and some of your speeches, I would not know many of the lessons that still affect me today in my adult life. Like this one.
My mother always said, when you're eating pretzels, chew before you swallow.